And I'm starting with a slide that I saw and was personally inspired by, was presented by Kercher at their Innovation Day by Andreas Schön, the head of procurement excellence at Kercher. And he was contrasting the changing environment for procurement and supply chain management. And I think it's clear, traditionally, and obviously still today, the main pillars of procurement and supply chain management are managing the dimensions of quality, cost, and availability. This is the core of what supply chain management is about. But the recent years have shown that this is actually now augmented by additional dimensions that are almost equally as important as these dimensions of cost, quality, and availability. And these dimensions are resilience, sustainability, and innovation. And innovation specifically on the adoption of new technologies, which in procurement there's huge potential to adopt also on the new trends in artificial intelligence. I think resilience is clear that is based on the multi-crisis world that we have lived through the couple of recent years, starting with the black swan of the COVID pandemic, followed then by maybe another black swan, the Suez Canal blockage, shortages that have followed across various commodities from semiconductors to plastics and other materials. We had then several geopolitical tensions, the war in Ukraine, and so on. I think the recent years have really been shaped by this constant crisis mode that companies are in, and that has put increasing urgency to work on having resilient supply chains. And resilient supply chains are supply chains that can withstand these disruptions, so that can endure, adapt, or transform in the face of these changes and disruptions. But there's also sustainability, and similarly to the pressures that are visible and urgent on the resilience side, on the sustainability side, particularly the regulatory initiatives that have come online have put increasing requirements and pressures on sustainability in supply chains. We had the German Supply Chain Act, then a few national initiatives in Switzerland and Norway, human rights due diligence legislation. We had, as part of the Green Deal on the European Union level, we can call it a flood of new regulations, ranging, of course, from the CSRD, one of the first ones that came online, then the CSDDD earlier this year, the deforestation regulation, the battery regulation, but also the Critical Raw Materials Act, CBAM, conflict minerals, of course, is a topic that's been around for a bit of a longer time, and also other countries, not just the European Union. We have the US regulation on Uyghur forced labor. We have the Canadian Modern Slavery Act, and in Australia, a similar law that came online. So really these pressures are increasing. And this increases the need for supply chain sustainability. And supply chain sustainability is integrating the concept of what's called the triple bottom line. So the 3 dimensions of sustainability, not just focusing on profit, but focusing on human rights, the people, the planet, and profit at the same time. And you might have seen this slogan, protect your people, your planet, and your profit. This is where this comes from. Managing supply chains with this goal of this triple bottom line in mind. That is what supply chain sustainability is all about. And when we contrast this resilience and sustainability, we of course do see that this can be in some way a paradox, because there can be many trade-offs, but on the other hand, there are also synergies. One of our dearest customers and sustainability employees at the BMW supply chain department, Piotr Wambier, has looked at precisely this topic. How do we balance resilience, sustainability during his doctoral thesis at the University of Bremen? And this really aligns interestingly and quite perfectly with also our mission at Prewave of balancing this resilience and sustainability really from the get-go, starting with both of these sides in mind. So what is this trade-off or this paradox? Building a resilient and a sustainable supply chain can lead to choices that are trade-offs. For instance, applying stringent criteria for selection of suppliers, being very, let's say, focused on having a clear human rights risk profile, having a low carbon footprint, having low environmental risk in the supply chain. That, of course, decreases the amount of suppliers you can actually work with, and thereby giving you less options in building a resilient supply chain. That is a clear trade-off between resilience and sustainability. Increasing inventory levels, it's one of the strategies to have a bit more ability to withstand disruptions. But of course, more inventory means more resources consumed, potentially storage costs, additional carbon footprint. It's a sustainability resilience trade-off. Same story for diversification. We will hear it in a presentation from Volvo. Yes, companies are looking to globally diversify their supply base to not be exposed to the war in Ukraine by having, let's say, within one commodity, all of the sourcing from one region. But of course, globally diversifying means lengthening the supply routes, increasing the carbon footprint. So here again, we have a trade-off. But on the other hand, obviously, there's a lot of topics and points which are clearly synergies. Supplier collaboration, increasing enablement and collaboration with suppliers is a clear plus for both sides. Cross-functional alignment and organization, and we see this at many customers. The resilience and sustainability functions are often merging into one organizational unit. Often it's the procurement center of excellence, supply chain digitalization. This is a clear best practice, and here sustainability and resilience under one roof makes a lot of sense. And of course, last but not least, supply chain transparency. Mapping supply chains, building transparency has benefits for both resilience and sustainability. So trade-offs and synergies. And what Pio did during his PhD research was then to compare these capabilities and how synergistic are they really? Yeah, which of them, like redundancy and capacity, it's a trade-off. But towards the right here on this chart, we see those capabilities and topics that are clear synergies between resilience and sustainability. Collaboration, transparency, efficiency, agility, risk management, supply chain re-engineering, all of these are synergistic for both. And that is how we can square the circle, and that was also the output out of the PhD thesis, is that by investing in these capabilities, we can overcome this trade-off. Yeah, we can build synergies on the one hand on operational and internal capabilities. These are topics, as we discussed, organizational setup within companies, but also management commitment, and very important, information technology and data. This is, of course, something we see when we work with customers on a daily basis. What is the readiness and maturity of having data on the supply base available? A key differentiator and a key factor when looking to have resilience and sustainable supply chain. But then as we move up, we are coming to what are called network capabilities. Capabilities that are not just capabilities that are built within your individual companies, but that work in the supply chain network, that work also externally. And these can be structured as a pyramid because one builds on the other. And in order to reach the agility on the supply chain side that we want for both sustainability and resilience, we need the collaboration, the risk management, the transparency, the capability to re-engineer supply chains, and then we can be agile. And that has been an outcome, and that we also want to use now as a foundation to structure this presentation. Because with these capabilities, and these are capabilities that align very closely with what we do at Prewave, you can address these resilience challenges like geopolitical tensions, natural disasters, black swan events. But you can also address these supply chain sustainability challenges like the CSDDD, the German Supply Chain Act. But interestingly, there's also the ones in the middle. And these are the ones that are especially sometimes surprising to customers and not oftentimes addressed also in the right way, we perceive, because topics that on the surface seem like clear sustainability topics like for instance, the US regulation on forced labor in the Vigo region, sounds obviously like a human rights challenge. But really, today we have $3.6 billion worth of goods suspended in US customs. And this is a resilience challenge. So this sustainability topic of a human rights risk really creates urgency because it threatens the supply and the availability of goods. And that's why this coming together of resilience and sustainability organizationally from a process perspective makes a lot of sense here. And many of our customers have realized that and are addressing these topics with high urgency. The same one is the EU deforestation regulation. And some of you might have wondered, we are putting the EUDR workshop in the afternoon on the resilience track. Well, it's for this reason. The deforestation regulation, you couldn't have a more green name for a regulation, yeah? Deforestation free. But really, if you contrast it particularly to the German Supply Chain Act or the CSDDD, it is a much, much different regulation. It's not based on business partners or suppliers, it's based on the products you're looking to bring to market or import. It's not an obligation to act from a due diligence perspective, but it's an obligation to succeed. You need to have deforestation-free products, and that is a must. And if you cannot succeed, you are prohibited from importing or bringing these products on the market. So again, this is an availability challenge. This is not a sustainability challenge, or actually it's both. And to quantify what this means, we looked at what is, just for natural rubber, one of the commodities, and of course the EUDR addresses topics like leather, coffee, cocoa, wood, and other products, but just one of the commodities, we have an import volume of 2.8 billion euros per year into the European Union. What percentage of these 2.8 billion is today compliant with the deforestation regulation? And what does it mean if it's not a high percentage? Well, it means that the supply chains are challenged. It means that goods will not be available at the extent that we expect them to be available. And that's why this delay, and this is of course a topic we will cover in the afternoon workshop, but this delay, which really acts to give companies a bit more time to prepare, to phase in the requirements, to ramp up the supply base and get this transparency and collaboration in the supply chain going, which is extremely difficult on this topic. Really, we believe that parts of the reasons for the delay is that there was a clear argument that we will have an availability problem on certain materials, and that's why the EU gave a certain extension for companies to get ready. And in the afternoon workshop at 14:30 on the resilience track in the other room, these will be some of the questions that we will be addressing in this workshop setting. So how will a postponement impact the compliance strategies of companies? And then also what are lessons learned, best practices that companies can already share? And clearly, and this is now what we also want to deep dive a little bit, these topics, EUDR, battery regulation, CSDDD, are clear topics that build and succeed with collaboration with the suppliers. Particularly because with all of these legislations, you need to go into the tier N of the supply chain, and there you need a strong collaborative approach. It's not just your tier ones, it's about getting data from the tier N, and this is a big challenge. So this collaboration piece really is, I think, for a reason at the foundation of these synergies and capabilities between resilience and sustainability. And what is the Prewave connection? The Prewave connection, of course, is that we have significant overlap between our customer supply bases that are from same industries. And that means that, let's say, a successful engagement of one customer yields benefits in the sense of a network effect for other customers. And this is true for all of these regulations. So this is about the mapping and also the validation of supply chains, building here an ecosystem and building capabilities also within Prewave that extend to all of our customers who share a large part of their supply base. But for Prewave, it also means that collaborating means engaging with industry initiatives, industry standards, working with standards, making sure we leverage these for efficiency, but also to reduce the burden on the suppliers. We are engaged, and this will be part also of afternoon sessions like the automotive roundtable, but also the collaboration workshop at the end. We are engaged in working groups on Catena X level to also integrate Prewave and to participate in these collaborative approaches, because we believe they are really essential to moving forward. And of course, it's also a clear step that we at Prewave took already 2 years ago with the action platform. So we recognized already, this is what we presented at the Prewave Day 2023, is that with this overlap in supply chains, also the ability to take actions with suppliers has clear synergies and collaboration benefits. In the sense that one audit, and we have now several audits already that are engaged and initiated through the Prewave Action Platform on Prewave. Here the benefit, of course, is that they seamlessly integrate into the scorecard. So a supplier who might have been at risk, after they are audited, the score, hopefully if the audit result is good, improves. So this is a seamlessly integrated approach, but we are also working and looking to work here with industry standard audit initiatives like the RSCI in the automotive industry, for instance. Another case for collaboration, we have built over the last years a library of supplier trainings. So these are standardized supplier trainings that we developed with our legal partner Taylor Wessing on educating suppliers, awareness trainings on the German Supply Chain Act. We're looking to extend these, of course, going forward for the CSDDD. These are available multilingually, and this is especially a great tool to work and engage with suppliers who have a lower level of maturity. So we have some customers in the construction industry and other industries where you have a lot of SME suppliers, and sending them a questionnaire with 100 questions, it won't get you anywhere. But starting with a basic training is here oftentimes the best measure to get started. And in the afternoon session at 15:45 on collaborative risk management, here in the sustainability track, we will exactly engage on some of these questions. When are companies willing to collaborate on mitigation actions, on incident management? This is a clear topic of priority for us also going forward. And again, to highlight this collaboration approach, we are also positioning at 2:30 in the afternoon industry-specific roundtables to engage in a flexible format on initiatives, standardizations, collaboration, but also for those who are maybe not in the automotive or energy industry, there is in parallel the EUDR workshop. And if even that is not for you, we have positioned in the registration area for 3 of our product managers and Thomas, our head of AI, so you can engage with the Prewave team, get insights into the latest developments, demos, and feedback. So from collaboration, the next step is risk management. So building on a collaborative partnership with the supply base, getting into the actual risk management. And risk management for us, the clicker. Can you maybe, we're back. So risk management for us, both for resilience, but of course, especially for sustainability, because this is really enshrined in the UN General Principles on Business Conduct, the OECD guidelines, is this end-to-end risk management approach, the supplier due diligence lifecycle of identify, assess, and prioritize, mitigate and report. And the Prewave tool, and again, this is for both resilience analysis and sustainability or due diligence analysis, is structured to support you end-to-end along this cycle, from identifying risks using the media or alert scores, as we call them, the peer scores, the country industry risks, the maturity assessments, where we have now close to 100,000 automated maturity assessments available in the platform. Grievances can be connected. Then the risk-based approach to prioritize, the implementation of actions, customer internal, but also the action platform. And then the ability to, once this process is concluded, to report out of the system on the due diligence, regulatory requirements, but also track your progress on resilience efforts. This is risk management. And this risk management, we see today, I mentioned it earlier, is today often carried out by a core team, typically a unit reporting as a dedicated unit in the procurement or supply chain organization. Often it's the center of excellence, comes by various names, but it's a core group of people looking to engage and structure this end-to-end risk management process throughout the procurement organization. But of course, when we talk about the procurement organization, we talk about not end-to-end risk management, but we talk about the supplier life cycle. And this is, of course, the core frame of mind and the core job of the procurement team is to work with suppliers along this life cycle. Now, it is our vision of risk management, and a vision that we also presented recently, but we have some exciting updates, is to integrate the Prewave approach, the core end-to-end risk management, the core risk-based approach with the broader procurement organization. And how do we do it? We do it by integrating with the broad procurement systems that are available on the market or the procurement systems that companies have set up internally. This is what we call the integrated scorecard, and it's about integrating, if it's moving. It's about integrating the core risk management process at the right point and the right time into the supplier life cycle. The clicker is not really working. Now it's working again. It's about integrating risk at the right points and the right places into the process of the supplier life cycle. Sanction screenings as part of the initial supplier screening process. A risk-based approach and anchoring the risk as part of the supplier warning, bonus-malus approaches. Monitoring suppliers over the course of their life cycle. And of course, also using the actions and action platform, but also the risk-based approach for developing suppliers further. And the way we realize that in practice is through integrations. We have presented at the Prewave Day the Ariba integration, where the Prewave scores are integrated seamlessly into SAP Ariba, saving, in this case, our customer Porsche Holding, minutes, up to 30 minutes per individual process step, so potentially huge savings on the whole. We also have our Checker integration live, and we also have more recently an Evalua integration. So we're really looking to integrate Prewave into these procurement systems to have the, sorry. Oh, yeah. To have the core team working with the broad procurement team. And this is what we call the integrated scorecard. Integrating the various sources of risks with external data, internal data, standards on assessments and audits, but also our internal action platform performed actions in order to then have a cohesive reporting towards, for instance, the CSRD, or internally through various reports and management dashboards. This is the vision of the integrated scorecard, and this is risk management in practice as the foundation for supply chain transparency. Supply chain transparency, a topic you will hear today, I think, many times. It will be part of some of the presentations in the morning. And supply chain transparency is, of course, one of the perfect examples of these synergies between sustainability and resilience. Many companies we are working with, I see some of you in the audience here, they started mapping the supply chain, building transparency around the semiconductor crisis, around exposure to the war in Ukraine. This was a trigger for many companies to say, we need to get into the tier N, we need to build the transparency. At the same time, there are various sustainability and compliance pressures that have the same requirement on building the transparency for the tier N. And this is again a synergy where both of these approaches can come together, and mapping supply chains, especially critical suppliers. And I think the battery regulation is a clear example here. It's both critical from a raw materials perspective, but it's also critical for the battery regulation. It's relevant for the CSDDD. Mapping these type of supply chains is a clear synergy across all of these dimensions. We at Prewave have invested heavily into supply chain mapping. We will hear an update on that later. And we positioned it also in this pyramid of solutions that we are offering at the very top, because this managing of risks in the deeper supply chain has, of course, additional complexity. I talked yesterday with one of our customers, and we basically ended up at the point where this multi-tier transparency, it's a lot of data, and it's actually really hard to get the right insight and the right actionable insight out of this data. Yeah? And it needs to be more than just 500,000 tier 4 suppliers. And this is why we are working hard, and this is one of the top areas of investment. How can we build analytics and dashboards on top of the TN data to address these core use cases? And we are structuring these multi-tier risk management use cases into 3 groups. The first one is what we call the tier N risk analysis. This is the extension of the approach for the German Supply Chain Act, or for the core risk analysis for tier 1 suppliers, into the deeper supply chain. Relevant for the CSDDD, relevant for the CSRD, the battery regulation. So analyzing, for instance, human rights, environmental due diligence topics, not just for the first tier, but down to the raw material production side. This is really a topic where traditional approaches are breaking. Many companies today are still following as their primary tool for compliance a questionnaire-based approach. So as part of the concrete risk analysis, we send questionnaires. It needs to be clear that for a CSDDD approach, for a tier N risk analysis approach, this is not feasible. It's not possible to send questionnaires to business partners you do not have a direct business relationship with. Of course, industry standards can help here, but still we need tools and ways of analyzing supplier risks that do not rely on this direct communication between a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5. And this is where the core of Prewave, the AI-based risk assessment, and not the questionnaire-based risk assessment, has a clear advantage. And supply chain transparency is essential to cover these pressures and legislations. And the same is true from a resilience perspective. We need to go with financial risks, insolvency analysis, natural disaster exposures into the tier 2, tier 3, and we cannot do that in a questionnaire approach. We need outside-in data to take clear decisions. This is the risk-based approach that many of you know for the CSDDD, where we start with the scoping dashboard, so highlighting the areas of risk broadly in the supply chain that are important, mapping suppliers, and then structuring this risk analysis process, looking then for the high-risk suppliers, not just on the tier 1, but in the tier 2, tier 3, and beyond, in order to eventually take actions and combining the leverage on those tier N suppliers. Now, this risk-based approach again, it's a synergy, yeah? And building the transparency, analyzing supplier risks. Yes, it can be mainly driven by the CSDDD, but a supply chain we map for purposes of CSDDD compliance, in many cases, and for some of your companies, will have overlap with the battery regulation. There will be overlap with the deforestation regulation, overlap with the UFLPA. So these synergies on the regulatory side, but also on the resilience side, critical raw materials from an availability perspective are often also those where human rights issues and environmental issues are most severe. Semiconductor, electronics, these are oftentimes considered more risky supply chains. So building transparency here and following a risk-based approach also yields benefits for resilience and sustainability. The other approach, on the next approach that we are now offering customers for already a few months, is to analyze risks in the deeper supply chain on a tier N exposure analysis. And this is, we will frame it today in the next presentation as a reactive approach, because we're looking for known risks in the deeper supply chain. We're looking for companies that are on specific sanction lists. We're looking for companies that are related to specific raw materials. So we're looking for known risks and want to find them. And for that, we have the tier N exposure dashboard. This is looking for scenarios that are already clear to us, like UFLPA, like trade conflicts, highlighting these exposures, so finding out which of the tier 1 suppliers are at risk. And then, and this is what we've currently invested in a lot, is then based on these exposures to start validating. And we are already piloting and will release broadly a parts level validation for the supply chain in the first quarter of next year. What does this mean? That means validating these exposures on the tier 2 or tier 3 collaboratively with the suppliers in order to identify which of these potential exposures are actual exposures down to the parts level. So for components you actually buy from your suppliers. And this is a key puzzle piece for managing these tier N risks. So not just seeing them, but also addressing them. And the last point is a topic that we will dive deeper in the next presentation from Volvo, is how can we move this tier N risk management approach towards a proactive approach, meaning working with risks that are not yet known, identifying the next wire harness in Ukraine. What is that? Where do we have exposures that we might not yet know? And this is tier N diversification, and this is then with these capabilities where we go into supply chain reengineering, diversifying the supply chain, restructuring the supply chain. And this is then the missing puzzle piece to have this agility in times of crisis, being able to withstand and have a resilient approach. And this is what we will see at the presentation after this keynote. But of course, the proactive approach and proactive resilience is also part of the other presentation in the morning. That's why I said in the morning it's all about from reactive to proactive. And looking back and reflecting at this graphic here that I again want to thank Kercher for allowing me to share today. We of course have a little twist here, and I'm sorry to say there is one error on this slide because we don't call it innovation. We call it superintelligence at Prewave. And to give us some updates on superintelligence, this is what we do with AI. This is where we come from. I would like to ask our head of AI, Thomas Moser, on stage.
Thank you, Harald. So we heard already how important data is, how much data there is. And of course, especially in these days, AI is the tool to use to understand the data, understand the supply chains. And I want to get you a bit through our value stories, through our the business we can offer, the value to the business we can offer, and show you how AI supports this. Generally, we always think about AI to be supportive, right? We have a supply chain superintelligence, and it supports you. It supports you in making decisions. It's decisions to lead to good business value, right? if you look again at this inverted pyramid, the way AI can help is mostly on the top part. Yeah, so let's jump into this and look how it can help. Let's start with faster time to response. And for this, I want to show you kind of the funnel we go through. And I think it's really good to imagine here with the numbers what it means, what we do. What we are doing is finding the needle in the haystack, right? So we have some million of input points. That's actually what we managed to improve in the last months. We managed to get 50% more data in the beginning of this pipeline to get more complete data by diversifying our sources, by finding new sources, and so on. These 4.5 million is though much too much to handle for any human intelligence, right? That's why we need the super intelligence to filter this down. This works in various steps for us and kind of has this intermediate step of our alerting, right? So the 4.5 million, they go down to our alerts. Actually, by now, it's also increased by quite a bit in the last month, so to around 400 alerts. And then it's not the end, right? That just enables you to work with this data, to work with this filtered down data and create incidents and mitigate them. That is the goal here. And our guiding principles are, of course, we don't want to miss anything. That's why we work on increasing the amount of data we get in here, increasing the amount of data we can process. But at the same time, you see how crazy of a filtering step this is. We do not want to give you too much. We don't want to give you too much so you cannot handle it. And last but not least, of course, as the value story already says, we want to do it as fast as possible. And one thing you see here, and that's also going into this story of not too much, is that we introduced in the last months alert updates. And to understand what the thinking behind it is we want to switch, or we switched from an alert-driven approach, where every time there's new information which is significant, creating a new alert you have to process, to an event-driven approach, where we are not just thinking about the updated information itself, but we are grouping them together in these events. And what you will then see instead of just an update with a new alert, you will see an update alert, which tells you that there was already something, there was an event, but we have more better information about it available. So that is here for you to have less data to go through to enable human intelligence. To the topic of speed, what we realized in this year and a bit before that too is to focus down on certain things, because not everything we report on has the same importance, the same urgency to it. So for us, important is it to focus on the parts, have this high-speed pipeline where we really can focus down to give you the important stuff, the fires, the insolvencies, and so on, as fast as possible, so you can react on it right away. We set ourselves some goals for this year. We are on track with that. But what I really want to show you is our thought is to really make it fast, to really make it instantaneous. We have to work with systematic sources, work with data providers, which really can give us this data on the fly. And one of this integration we worked on in the last month was with Coface, and in particular for insolvencies. And I want to show you kind of what this means in practice by an example. So we have here the unveiled Chemie GmbH, and we really get here not just there is an insolvency or not, we get kind of a financial, so this DRA score, financial score, how they perform. And this means it's not just getting the information when it really happens, but you see earlier, you see the warning signs and you can react to it, right? And if you then actually compare this here with the news cycle we have for these for the specific one, the earliest news we found was like 6th of November. So this is a 2-day window, right, where you have information earlier, critical information, which might save you money to know about it. So this difference is really something which is valuable, and that's why we work hard in like integrating the source and showing it to you immediately when there is any update. This integration of Coface is still not only relevant for this faster time to respond. It's all, sorry, there's one of the examples how does then in the end look like. So this is then the last step here where we see the insolvency. You would see an alert here that the score decreases to 0 and also what the meaning behind it is. That is how it will be delivered. So this integration is not only relevant for our faster time to respond story, but also for proactive resilience. Why? Because we can actually understand the scoring. We can understand how to rate a company based on these kind of scores. And that's also what we see with this DRA score. And in our scoring interface, you can see how a company is affected. And that's really something you see on the specific company based on this integration. Besides, for this proactive resilience, beside this integration with Coface, the other thing we worked on in the last month is integrating better scores for geographical risks. So we're talking natural disasters, so floods, earthquakes, and so on. Why? Because it's not really good to think about these things on a country perspective, right? Think about countries like Russia, they're gigantic, and giving a general score for one country is not really enough. So what we worked on is integrating various data sources where we can really not only give you a very localized information about the risk, but also a risk which really means something. So giving you a percentage, how likely an event of a certain magnitude is in the upcoming year. And that's, of course, if you think about proactive resilience, valuable because you can calculate with this. This has a meaning, this has a value behind it. And I looked up some examples based on our data. There are areas, for example, here in North America, where we have quite a high earthquake risk, but basically no flood risks. Then there's like stuff in Switzerland where it's quite low risk in general. And then there are these areas, Southeast Asia, where actually flood risk is quite high, right? So this is all stuff you would now get on a level of the location, the specific location of the sites. To give you an example how this looks like, this is of course now then integrated with our Prewave score. We see here an example in Japan, where we really see there's quite a high earthquake risk, which is probably to expect in Japan. And yeah, that's kind of how you see it. You have this target risk down there with the score. So the goal is here to give you a better insight into a specific location of the site, specific risks for the sites, and not to be too general. Moving on, as Harald already pitched, the whole multi-tier risk management is quite data-driven, quite a lot of data, and quite hard to put into, like learn something out of it. So that's really something where we were in this kind of lucky situation that we built this whole pipeline for our faster time to response and could use it to also understand the relations between between suppliers and customers. And that's what we kind of did in the last months. We built up a database I will show later about articles which describe relations between companies. Here are some examples between Cattle and some other companies. And here you see an example of an excerpt of the graph we were able to build with this. And to show you a bit where we were a few months ago and at the Prewave day, it was still like kind of a small thing for us. We had a lot of customs data. We had then the predictions. So that's always this triple, the three pillars, if you want, of our tier N supply chain mapping. We have customs data. Customs data is something where we really get between different sites how the goods are shipped around. We have media data, which then is we really have text behind it, we have news behind it, we describe the relationship. I will show something to this. And then we have predictions, which use our superintelligence to use the customs data to enhance it, to fill the missing gaps where we actually know more. And in the last month, we actually built up quite a big data set about this. So by now we have around 4 million media connections between customs and supplies in our system. And that is quite exciting because it's not just the information that there is a connection. We have for certain connections also a lot of information there. And just to show you an example, like a kind of a random example about Apple and Qualcomm here, you see we have actually thousands of articles we collected about their relationship, about the business relationship, which means we are knowing much more than that they are connected. We know incredible details. We see peaks for times where Apple plans to replace Qualcomm. We see a peak where they then started to, even though what I said earlier, to renew their relationship till 2026, and also when they go on and renewed it again. So this data is much more than just connections. It gives us insight into what this connection means, where customs data gives us insights into the goods which are shipped. This really gives us even more insight to some extent. And what we are aiming to do is, because this is still a bit on a company level, to also use this additional insight to break it down to the site level, to give even more value to everybody who wants to understand their supply chain. Yeah, with this. Thanks.
And this actually brings us to the end.